The dysfunction that we're seeing here in Wisconsin is mirrored by the chaos and dysfunction that we're seeing out of Washington, where the Republican Party is really struggling to govern. Even though they have generous majorities, they're not able to agree amongst themselves. And that's because I think Republicans here know that they're going to actually have to run under more competitive maps. They've got a very difficult election cycle coming up, and they're having to reckon with the fact that the decisions that they've made over the last 15 years have put Wisconsin, and especially our schools and our kids, in a very difficult financial position. Do they want to continue down that harmful path, knowing that they will finally face accountability from the voters? Or are they going to make a different choice and actually respond to what Wisconsinites have been asking for? This is really an important question for them to ask themselves. Do their members want to be held hostage or kowtow to the most extreme voices in their caucus that are demanding things that nobody in Wisconsin wants? And with that, we'll be happy to take some questions.
You guys are mentioning the extreme members, extremists. We've seen statements from both the Assembly GOP and the Evers administration specifically calling out the Senate Republicans. Along those lines, who are the extremists and what are the extreme positions that they're taking in your view?
Well, I think an extreme position would be not investing more dollars in K-12, demanding a cut rather than a significant investment in the University of Wisconsin, which is our number one economic engine for the state, being unwilling to invest in childcare. And I think, you can see on Twitter or just when talking with Republicans who some of those really extreme members are that are saying that they would be happier to have no budget at all, something that would have disastrous consequences for Wisconsin.
And I'll add, just briefly, it's been interesting to see how many Republicans on joint finance were completely willing to go along with votes to benefit and ultimately benefit the interests and goals of those extreme members who were willing to put their own opinions aside in order to have a budget that was written entirely by extremists. I mean, they gave the entire budget process over to these extremists for weeks now, as we've all sat through these hearings and watched as they weren't putting the money into public schools that we know we need, that they weren't putting the money into programs that we know we need across the state so working families can succeed. It really has been a shocking display in the Capitol in the joint finance hearings.
Can you talk a little bit about what those quote-unquote disastrous consequences are if we don't have a budget on time or at all?
Sure. Well, the number one thing is that our local school districts and our municipalities have to budget. They have to make choices about what they can spend and how much they need to tax, and they're not able to do that if they don't know what the state budget is going to look like and what kind of commitment they're going to have from the state. And that's really hard. That has real-world consequences. For instance, how many teachers can our school districts hire, right? How many aides? Think about all the services that are provided by local government: police, fire, public safety, EMS, libraries. All of that funding is potentially at risk if the local governments don't know how much they're going to be getting from the state. But secondly, we face a looming deadline at the federal level, right? We see a horrible budget bill being debated in Washington that could contain really, really significant cuts for services that all Wisconsinites rely on. And I'm thinking about, obviously, health care, but certainly things like education, transportation, natural resources, agriculture, right? And we're in a little bit of a race against the clock with the federal government. So there are certain things that we would need to do here in Wisconsin to pass a budget to take advantage of existing federal programs and existing federal dollars. And if we miss those deadlines, those funds are not going to be available to us, and we're going to be in a much more difficult funding environment. So this is about protecting Wisconsinites and making sure that Wisconsinites have what they need, and part of that is passing a budget on time.
Looking at the Senate with those so-called extremist holdouts, looking at possibly needing Democratic votes to pass this, what would Democrats in the Senate need to vote for the budget as it looks right now?
Well, we would certainly need a budget that invests in the things Wisconsinites have been asking for, right? I don't think it's a mystery that we care a lot about child care and early childhood. We care about public K-12 education, higher education, and health care. But ultimately, what we really need is for Republicans to pick up the phone, for the Senate Majority Leader to decide that he is not willing to risk his majority and his more vulnerable members to kowtow to the most extreme voices that have clearly said that they're actually not interested in a budget. Their best outcome is to not even have a budget at all. And so it's really just his willingness to pick up the phone and accept the reality of the caucus that he's built.